Well, hello, my friend. I uh, I wanted to um, do what I said I would try to do, which is um, create a video and talk a little bit about the story of Jonah. This is the story of you. This is the story of me. Like the mythical Jonah, swallowed up by the sea, taken down hard, blinded, carried away on the tide of resistance to what no man can say. This is the story of you. This is the story of me. Like the mythical Jonah, swallowed up by the sea. Taken down deep into the depths of despair, where no light of joy ever makes its way down there. This is the story of you. This is the story of me. Like the mythical Jonah, swallowed up by the sea. So yeah, um, the story of Jonah has a special relevance to me because Jonah is he is a preacher, and I guess at some level I've always felt like I was destined to be a preacher. Like um, I just have this sort of memory that as a like a 13 or 12 or 13-year old boy, um, I guess I just sort of felt like I was destined to be a preacher. Uh, it, you know, it always seemed to kind of be the one thing. I don't know. Maybe other people have this feeling of, it's something like you're good at it. You have a talent for something, and you didn't never really worked at that talent. It was just sort of given to you as a gift. And that was how I always felt about the preaching business. I just sort of felt like I had a natural gift, and I never, and of course, when you do have a natural gift like that, oftentimes you do work at it. It's something you're good at, or you feel you're good at, and so then you go and you actually become better at the thing that you're good at because you enjoy it. It comes easily. You put time into it, and so, from a fairly early age, I would go and participate in Bible study groups at the church, downtown here, in St. Andrews, and I always just felt like I had a kind of I had a natural hunger, interest, what you call it, in interpreting these biblical stories. And of course, in the early days, my interpretations were wildly useless and not very good. But even at a very fairly early age, like a teenage boy, I was already starting to look for the meaning behind the words, like looking for some. And it always seemed like that the words, I guess I sort of was willing to give the Bible stories and the Bible, and I believe that it might have something to say to me in my life, and something useful to say to me in my life. And so I was interested to know what that might be, and trying to yeah, discern what it might have to say. So I guess from a fairly early age, I was already involved in kind of interpretations of the Bible. But they were, like I said, in those days, I was not a very skillful. I don't know what you call somebody, a theologian, a person who interprets the Bible. But this is the story of you. This is the story of me. Like the mythical Jonah, swallowed up by the sea, taken down deep into the depths of despair. No light of joy ever seems to find its way down there. So my initial thought about Jonah was to kind of see this story as being about a guy who was given a job to go to Nineveh. And as I remember it, he was supposed to tell the people there in Nineveh that they were in danger of the judgment of God, that the path they were on was problematic, and they needed to change, or they were going to run into some real trouble. And that Jonah at some level felt like he was called to go there and tell this great civilization uh, that it was misguided and was in danger of um, creating a huge problem for itself. It would collapse, essentially. And a part of Jonah decided that really that was not a very good idea at all. I mean, he felt he should do it at some level, that it was something that needed to be done, but he also could see that It's not a great idea to go poking the bear and telling the people who are basically in power that they are, um, you know, misguided in their judgments of how to go about life. He didn't see this as a good option. So this was my basically my first line of interpretation. It's very, very typical, very standard. But I think that in time, the way I've started to look at these stories is quite different from the way that people normally look at the stories. So, just to give you an example of what I mean, there's a way of thinking about the story as being, this is the story of you. This is the story of me. Like the mythical Jonah, swallowed up by the sea. Taken down hard, blinded, carried away on the tide of resistance to where no man can stay. To where no man can stay. To where no man can stay. So, in over the years, my kind of style of biblical interpretation has changed quite a bit. It's evolved. It's become very, I don't know, different from what you will typically find in most churches and even in most books for that matter, theological books, because my feeling now is that I first, when I come to these stories in the Bible, I read them, kind of, they're just a story first, get the story, what happened. But then I kind of take the characters in the story and I transform them into psychological elements of my own mind. So, for example, in the story of the Exodus from Egypt, or let's take a different story, like the story of David versus Goliath. You have, of course, the shepherd boy David, and he's up against the massive armored giant Goliath, who is the Philistine champion. And David is this, kind of smallish, armored shepherd boy with a sling, and he's up against this massive giant, and I mean, it looks pretty much like it's a non-contest. But David, as you know the story, he takes the sling and he has he's used to actually dealing with some of the beasts that might attack the a herd of sheep or goats, and he's used the sling to ward off some of the predators, which are fairly powerful animals that are dangerous, and so he's skillful with his sling, and he knows that he can drive away a lion. But and of course there's this, the story is that he has these sort of smooth stones that he loads into his sling, and he whips it around, and he throws it, and one of the stones strikes Goliath right here, right between the eyes, right there is where it hits him. He's sort of unguarded, unprotected there, and that one blow to that sort of vulnerable place causes Goliath to tumble over and be defeated. And you can take the story as being a description of a literal event, like there was a boy and he went out and fought the giant, and I'm not even saying that that's not possible, that it wasn't actually an event, but that's not the way that I tend to look at these stories very much anymore. So I tend to think of it more in terms of psychology now, and for me, the psychology is the most important item. So there is a part of my own mind that is a Goliath. It's armored, it's strong, it's powerful, it's the default kind of way of looking at reality. And that Goliath doesn't seem vulnerable to, little other parts of the psyche that might come and challenge it as to its sort of like established sense of who I am. So there is a part of my psychology in which is very confident. It knows who I am. It's like, I am Jonathan Bailey. I am here. I know who I am. I have this history. I'm this old. I'm yada yada da. Well, then there's this other little voice that says, no, you're wrong. You don't know who you really are. You think you know who you are, but you're actually wrong. There's a problem with your understanding of who you are. There's a problem with your basic conception of how the world functions and who you are in that world. And there's just a basic blindness. And Goliath, the dominant way of understanding, just sort of dismisses that as being, well, yeah, there's all these, um, but I know who I am. I know who I am. So shut up, David, and go back to wherever it was you came out of. Go back to the hole you crawled out of before you started to challenge me and my understanding. So I think that this way of thinking about Bible stories is quite different, because instead of Goliath being out there, it's a part of my own mind, psyche. And David is a part of my own psyche too. It's another element in the own, and there's a battle going on here between the sort of the established understanding and something that's challenging that established understanding. And effectively in the story, what you find is that the underdog here throws a stone, but it strikes the huge Goliath right where basically we think, where our center of kind of rationality sits. And so the stone that David throws at Goliath is devastating, because Goliath sees there's some wisdom in what is being in I mean, he sees the logic in what David is challenging. What David is saying, the force of David in the mind is saying there's something wrong with you in Goliath and your understanding, and Goliath wants to dismiss that and say forget it, but then something hits him between the eyes, and then he can't really ignore it. It's reasonable, it's rational. And so that's kind of how I sometimes look at these stories. Like I try to I see them as attempts to understand the human psyche, but you need a sort of a story that you can fit to try to understand your own mind better. And I'll stop there for now, but I'll continue a little later on.